The Tall and Small Collection, Season 2, Chapter 22, Making a Musician. Ashlynn was absolutely jittering with excitement. How could she be so silly? It had been around for years. How come she only just heard about it? This was going to be the greatest thing ever, especially for Dorian. Ashlynn hurried into her apartment and pried her shoes off of her feet and left him at the front door. By the sound of it, Dorian was playing music on the counter, singing at the top of his lungs. Maybe it was Ashlynn's fondness for the borrower family, but in her opinion, Dorian had true talent. Now that they were mending fences, Ashlynn felt like she could step up and help him reach his full potential. It was possibly a risk, and maybe she should have talked to Soren about it first. But she was too excited to care. At the very least, she needed to show this to Dorian. "I'm home," she called. "Dorian, you there?" Ashlynn threw her bag onto the couch, making sure it was safe to do so, and fished her phone from her purse, practically skipping to the kitchen with her device in hand. The teenage borrower was standing on the kitchen counter, song just ending, and instinctually turned and looked up in the direction of Ashlynn's voice. "Hey," he said with a smile. "Welcome back. Is everything okay?" "Yeah," said Ashlynn eagerly. "More than great, actually." "Big news? Should I grab Soren and Ray? Well, maybe just Ray. Soren still might be out. You look like you're getting ready to burst," said Dorian, seeing the light in Ashlynn's eyes. She was obviously eager to share whatever it was. "Well, yes and no. It's mostly news for you. Well, less of news and more of a surprise. A surprise for you. Well," Ashlynn sputtered and tripped over her words, making Dorian chuckle. "Here, I'll just show you." Ashlynn stepped up to the counter and swiped open her phone before clicking on an app she didn't even know existed. GarageBand. Ashlynn propped up her phone against the wall and let the program load. Dorian watched Ashlynn excitedly tap away at the screen and adjust it so that he could clearly see the device, which was almost as tall as he was while laying on its side. He wasn't sure what had her so worked up, but he was curious enough to walk across the counter and find out. He hadn't seen Ashlynn this excited about something in a while. "Okay, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I played around with it after one of my coworkers showed this to me on his phone," said Ashlynn. Dorian, still confused, hoped some useful information would be on the screen. There were loads of boxes with names like Test and Curtain Call. It wasn't until Ashlynn clicked on Test and hit the play button that he realized what it was. It was a music app. Ashlynn hit the play button at the top of the screen, and the song started. It was pretty simple. There was a drum sequence that was pretty repetitive, and a piano and guitar duo. He listened to the music and ran it through his song repertoire. He didn't recognize it. "What song is this?" he asked after it ended abruptly. "Is this what you're so excited about?" "You'll be excited about it in a second," said Ashlynn. "I wrote it." "What?" he asked. "You play? How? You were at work." "No, not at all," said Ashlynn. "This app lets you write music." Dorian's confusion instantly melted into pure excitement. "What? How?" he asked, now eagerly facing the device, wondering how to work it. "Super easy," said Ashlynn. She proceeded to click a few buttons and gave Dorian a quick rundown tutorial of what she understood about the app. Things like how to change the speed, tempo, of the instruments, as well as how to change the key the instruments played in. She even showed him how to add tracks for multiple instruments. "And, get this," said Ashlynn, as she whisked herself out of the kitchen to go into the living area, only to return a few seconds later with some kind of corded device that looked like headphones, but the end looked a little different. Dorian, frankly, could care less about what the device was because he was shaking with excitement from the program app thing Ashlynn just showed him. Finally, something he could use to write his own music. He'd written plenty of lyrics and songs, but never to actual music with instruments playing. His eyes finally wouldn't keep him from living his dream. Well, mostly. "Okay, it's all set," said Ashlynn, as she pushed the little knobby end of the headphone into the headphone jack. "What's set?" asked Dorian, just as Ashlynn held the weird mesh end up to him, his self-pitying thoughts taking a back seat to this new setup. "It's a microphone," said Ashlynn. "It's a small mic that is more sensitive, so it'll make the sound better quality than normal headphone microphones." Dorian's jaw dropped. "What, a real one?" he asked. The end was still relatively large, like the end of a headphone, which took both of his hands to hold up. It was about the length of his arm, and the end was a bit bulky. Still, it was incredible. "Yeah, all real. We'll need to get it set up on a stand or something, but you can sing into it and record your songs," said Ashlynn, her smile radiating warmth and excitement. At this, Dorian felt those thoughts come back into his head. His shoulders slumped, and Ashlynn noticed instantly. "What's wrong? Did I do something?" asked Ashlynn. "No, it's perfect. It's just no one will hear it," muttered Dorian, disappointment encasing his voice, speaking in between heaving sighs to keep himself composed. "Record? Yeah. But what good is it if no one can listen to it? Music is meant to be shared, and like everything about us, it has to be kept a secret." Disheartened, Dorian looked at the screen and pressed a couple of buttons, letting the guitar play its set loop over and over. Ashlynn bit her lip in obvious agreement. It was certainly a problem, especially if Dorian wanted to share his music. Being a borrower with a very human interest was a challenge. He wanted to share his talent, and rightfully so, but it was risky for him to publish. Or was it? Ashlynn knew it would be a risk, and tried thinking through the potentials, and, thankfully, she had a few ideas. She just had to show Dorian her vision. It was a risk, but it felt like it was worth taking. "There might be a way, Dorian," said Ashlynn. Dorian half scoffed and rolled his eyes. "Yeah, right. Unless you can make me grow or be human, it doesn't matter. My music isn't going to see the light of day without revealing our kind. It's just a fact." She reached past Dorian and exited out of the app, and then opened her camera. "Dorian, look at the camera, and tell me who is bigger," said Ashlynn, as she tilted the phone to have them both in frame. Dorian rubbed the side of his neck, looking dejected, and sighed. "Is this a trick? Obviously you are," said Dorian, as he caught how he looked in the camera. "No trick. Now," Ashlynn said, as she took a step back, leaving Dorian in the forefront of the camera, while she was in the background. "Who is bigger now?" Dorian watched her instead of the camera, folding his arms defensively. "Ashlynn, you just stepped backward. It doesn't make me any less small," said Dorian. "You sure? Look at the camera again," directed Ashlynn, eyes urging him on. Dorian was about to roll his eyes again when he caught a glimpse of the point Ashlynn was trying to prove. With him standing closer to the camera, he and Ashlynn looked to be about the same height. The image was slightly blurry, but the picture didn't lie. "But it's perspective. The camera doesn't know the difference between our heights, and neither will anyone else unless you tell them. Look," said Ashlynn, as she stepped back up to the counter and leaned over, picking up her phone with one hand and habitually laying the other palm up just behind Dorian. As As her thumb typed feverishly, Dorian took a few steps back and sat against Ashlynn's upturned palm. The borrower teen's mind was still reeling from what he just saw from the camera lens. He hadn't thought about it like that before. That perspective could change his size. "Here, Dorian, what do you see?" asked Ashlynn, as she carefully lifted the hand Dorian was sitting on and brought it to her chest so Dorian could see the phone from her perspective. Dorian readjusted so he sat in the palm of her hand cross-legged, rather than legs dangling off the edge, and hooked his arm around her thumb. The screen was filled with song after song, but something Dorian noticed after a minute of Ashlynn scrolling was that they all had different doodles set as profile pictures, not actual photos, and silly or obscure usernames, not real ones. Only a few had their own name on their profile. "No one knows these users. They're just content creators, anonymous musicians," said Ashlynn. "And you could be one of them. Dorian, you can get your music out there, and no one needs to know who you are. They'll only know what you show." Dorian was absolutely speechless, mind blown and short-circuiting. He hadn't thought about it like this. He thought humans always found out about people who tried keeping things a secret. They were curious after all. He didn't know how to even come close to describing how he felt. His heart was fluttering in his chest nervously. His entire body felt electrified with excitement. His breath shook as he inhaled and exhaled, ears ringing slightly. Ashlynn continued speaking. "Dorian, we can do this for you. We can get it all set up before you go back. Dorian? Are you okay?" Ashlynn looked down to her palm to see Dorian visibly shaking. Her heart sank. Was he having doubts? Did he not think he was good enough? Whatever the reason, she needed to make this right. Hey, I'm sorry." Ashlynn set down her phone and curled her fingers slightly around Dorian's form as she reached up with her other hand and began stroking the teenage borrower's back slightly. "Dorian, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you or press. I just thought..." Dorian spun around, still seated, and threw his arms around the thumb she was using to stroke his back, squeezing with all his might. For several seconds, Ashlynn let Dorian shake. Initially, her heart sank, worried she had gone too far. It wasn't until he looked up into her blue-gray eyes that she could see that it wasn't fear or him being upset. He was elated, excited beyond words. All she saw in the pale blue eyes of her miniature musician was pure, overwhelmed excitement. "Thank you, Ashlynn. I don't even know what to say. Thank you," said Dorian. He drew his legs closer into a full-body hug of her thumb. Ashlynn's heart, absolutely gushing over the teen, could only breathe a sigh of relief and smile. Since their talk, things had gone beyond smooth between them, like they had never parted, thick as thieves once again. They eventually retreated to the couch in the living room to decide usernames and passwords. Ashlynn and Dorian both decided that as long as they kept Soren in the loop, and he had no major qualms with it, Dorian could start publishing his music instantly. They constructed a few names Dorian liked that were a play off of his name, such as So Dorian, but ultimately thinking that Dorian Walker, as in Wall Walker to honor him as a borrower, would probably be best. It also sounded like a human name, which would keep suspicion to a minimum if the question ever arose. While they talked, Dorian kept clearing his throat. Was it emotion? He didn't think so. For the past few days, he couldn't quite shake a little cough in the back of his throat. The entire borrower family had a cough for the past few days, actually, as had the entire borrower colony. And while Dorian and Ashlynn sat on the couch picking out names to hide Dorian's secret identity online, Ray was rushing through the walls to the secure line in the kitchen, with a feverish and coughing Maisie on his back. Ray had seen this before, and he was scared. Maisie was slumped over in her pack, which was firmly secured on Ray's back. Soren hadn't made it back yet. Maisie whimpered as Ray grabbed hold of the line and slid down as fast as possible. Hopefully, Ashlynn would know what to do. She had to know. Little did he know, this was a sad sign of things to come.